Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we'll be talking about the contents of this package, and it's pretty obvious from the stuff on the table, as well as the title and all that, what it is. Now, before I even open it, let's just say this right up front. Yes, this is about the GCLoader. This is about an ODE for the GameCube. I'm sure a lot of you already knew what that was, and you don't care about any of the backstory stuff, etc., which is totally fine. If that's the case, there's time code right there. Feel free to skip to just the review part. Otherwise, I have a bit of a backstory here, and I would like to talk about that. So, okay, we're going to do that. Now, it all starts with a video I did, I think it was a couple of years ago. I did a video on an HDMI modified GameCube. In fact, let's go ahead and show it to you because it's sitting inside of this package. But, so why would I send it back to myself? How did that happen? What's going on? Well, there is a reason for all of this. So, here it is. This is the GameCube, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are very familiar with it. So we'll move all this stuff out of the way and take this little piece of tape off that just listed some stuff. All right, now, and I'll kind of put the console back together as we chat. So basically, this Nintendo GameCube was originally sent to me a couple of, I think it was a couple of years ago, and it's an HDMI modified GameCube. There's a port on the back there. There's a region-free switch on it as well, and it also had some other things done to it. It had new thermal paste put into it. The disk drive on it also had the Xeno chip, so it basically had two region modifications, which sounds kind of pointless, but there is a reason for that. This cube itself is originally Japanese, which meant it had the Japanese BIOS. The switch, the toggle there, allows it to have both a Japanese and North American BIOS. The reason that would be useful, other than the region-free gameplay, is that the Japanese GameCube and the American GameCube slightly format memory cards a little bit differently in some game cases. Obviously, language is also a factor, but then there are other situations where that can actually matter. So when you install the Xeno chip into the disk drive, not only do you unlock the gameplay of Japanese and American stuff, but you also get the European stuff. So there is actually some practical application to doing both. And again, that will be a factor in a bit. But yeah, so the modification was done. I liked it. It was pretty cool. But as time went on, something else came up. I got an HDMI modified Sega Dreamcast by Dan Koons, who I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. But yeah, he basically designed the DC HDMI. I even did a video on that. I did, I think, 2 videos on it. But my particular Dreamcast, at some point, I swear, there was like a ghost in it or something. I don't know what it was. I don't believe in ghosts, but like it was acting really bizarre. So like the HDMI signal out of it just wouldn't be stable, and then eventually it just died entirely, and I couldn't figure out what that was about. So I actually reached out to Dan, and I was like, yo, here's the situation. Is there any way that you can, do you have any advice? Like, what should I do? And he was like, oh, dude, just mail it to me, and I'll take care of it. And I was like, that's really nice of you. I'm totally going to do that. And like 4 months later, I actually sent it because I was super busy and I just didn't have time to do it. But like 4 months later, I reached out to him and was like, yeah, sorry, is this still an option? He was like, yeah, of course. So I sent it to him. And he gets the Dreamcast, he fixes it all up, and he sends it back to me. But he also includes a GCLoader, which again is the subject of this video, and we'll go into all the details of that. But the super short version of what that is it's an SD card reader for your GameCube that replaces your disk drive so you can play all of your games off of an SD card. I know, it sounds pretty cool. But again, we'll get back to the greater details of that soon enough. So he sends that to me as well. He's just like, yeah, if you want, you can do a video on it. I would appreciate that. I'm like, of course I'm going to do a video on that because that is awesome. That's exactly the kind of thing I would love to talk about. But there were a couple of complications with that. First, you can see based on the GameCube's shape that it is kind of awkward, especially because the disc tray is kind of small. It always was because of the mini discs, etc. Unlike the SD card readers, the ODEs, optical disc emulators that exist for things like the Sega Saturn or the Dreamcast, those kind of sit up high enough that you can just open up the lid, reach in, pop in the SD card or pop out the SD card and call it a day. With the GameCube, based on the way Nintendo designed it, where the loading tray, or sorry, where the motherboard makes contact with the disk drive is a little too low with this tiny of a space for the human hand to really reach in there. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more like it would be really irritating to do. So it would be best suited to take the lid off every time you wanted to replace the SD card or change the games or whatever. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And obviously I wasn't the only person that thought of that because it was a place called, I think it was called Bear Industries. This guy who does tons of like 3D printed cool stuff. Who sells 3D printed stuff. I ordered from him basically a replacement mount that sits inside the GameCube. It physically takes the space of where the disk drive once was. It's very much designed to be compatible with the GCLoader. It includes an SD card extender. So there's an SD card extender plugged into the board that feeds up into this, and then ultimately you can just pop the SD card in like right here where, yeah, just like that. Boom, like right there where the games originally would have gone. Again, we'll talk more about that in a bit. So I had that part. I also had the GameCube itself, and I had the GCLoader. Now the GCLoader, this particular version, is the plug-and-play version. There's two versions, one that required soldering and one that does not. I'm not a dude who solders stuff. That is not my wheelhouse whatsoever. So I was like, all right, cool, plug-and-play version. I was gonna wait for this thing to show up, specifically the 3D printed thing, and I was also going to just use that HDMI modified GameCube I had been talking about. So that was my plan. In an effort to kind of psych myself up for that, because that's kind of how I operate before I do any of this stuff, I just kind of want to, I don't know, just play something that's relevant to that console or whatever, and just kind of get myself in the mode, just get hyped. And in that case, I wanted to fire up the GameCube, and I was playing with it for a little bit, and then I hadn't used it in a little while, and then out of nowhere, the LED in it just died. Like, I turned it off, turned it back on, the LED just, it burned out. I didn't, you know, I know that they had the guys who modded it originally had put a new LED in there. I don't know, but they put in like a multicolored one, but at this point it was no longer booting up. I didn't know if the console had died or what had happened, but it turns out it was just the LED, and I was like, okay, that sucks, but fine. I at first thought maybe I'll just deal with it, and then I was venting to a buddy of mine whose name is Jesse. You guys probably would recognize him. He has appeared in several of my videos, including my Blockbuster video. He actually shot most of that. Yeah, so he's been in a bunch of my stuff. The Atari Jaguar Dental video that I did, he was in that. He's in a bunch of stuff. But anyway, so I was just kind of venting to him about this whole situation. And he's like, well, dude, just send it to me and I'll fix it and I'll install all that stuff. Because I was like, well, okay. So I waited for the 3D printed thing to show up. Once it arrived, I took the GameCube, and I took the GCLoader, and I was just like, all right, see ya. Threw that all in a package and sent that off to California. Jesse then went ahead, opened it up. He completely redid the installation that was originally done to everything. He was like, yeah, I decided to just completely rewire everything myself with stronger cables, and with the HDMI mod in the back. He was like, yeah, I wanted to make that more secure. He's like, originally, because he opened it up, and what he determined was that on the inside, it was fixed into place with just a glue gun. And he was like, there's no reason that you needed to just do a glue gun. He's like, so he literally designed his own 3D printed piece to fit into the spot where the original modders had cut this into place. Like brand new, specific for this unit only. He designed it and just, okay, cool, I'll just put it there. He put that in place. He installed the, like I said, the Bear Industries thing right there. Looks beautiful now that I'm actually seeing it for the first time. Yeah, it's, and he, put in the new LED, and yeah, he's like, he just redid all the stuff and he did whatever preventative maintenance he could. So this is like a super ultimate GameCube. And I still have the disk drive that was originally in this that has the Xeno chip on it. That's still in my possession. But aside from that, like, he sent that, and all I did was get the SD card ready. So now let's talk about the actual GCLoader. So yes, the GCLoader, as mentioned a couple of times now, is an ODE, an optical disc emulator that simply replaces the disk drive. The goal of that is that when you do that, obviously you can no longer play the actual discs, but you can, depending on your motives. In my case, it's disc preservation. I'm a collector as well as a gamer. I like to make sure my collection stays as pristine as possible while also allowing me to play the games. So in my case, if you've watched my videos over the years, you've probably noticed this in a couple of points. Not only am I a pack rat of physical things, I'm a pack rat of digital things, meaning Every single disc I acquire for any given console, with the exception of the Xbox One, that's the only one I can't do. Everything else, I will take the disc and I will dump it to a computer in an ISO format. An ISO is a digital, basically, replication of a disc. ROM, by the way, is cartridge. Don't mix up the terms. People do that all the time. Now, I started doing that like 6 years ago. But when I started doing that, I never thought it would really have a purpose. I was just doing it just to verify my discs, which I know sounds like insane, but the reason you do that, especially when you buy a lot of used content, is those discs can be damaged when you buy them. They might boot, and you might think, oh no, they're fine, but unless you rip them to a computer, you don't actually know that. There could be damaged sectors later on in the game. So if you can rip it to a computer, you know the disc is fine. So I had ripped every single GameCube game I owned to a computer, and it was just sitting there. Ultimately, now I did all that work in advance. All I had to do was throw it onto this SD card. This SD card is a 512 gigabyte card. In fact, most of this SD card is just the outer piece. Yeah, that's well suited in there. Yeah, this is a micro SD card. Dude, how far has technology come? This little piece of plastic and barely any metal contains a 512 gigabyte capacity. Every GameCube game, the maximum a single GameCube game is 1.35 gigabytes? That's insane. And do the math on that. You know, and that's per disc, because that was a fixed data rate for GameCube games. But anyway, yeah, so do the math. 512 gigabytes, you get probably a plausible, accessible, like 480 gigs or something like that. Yeah, that's going to fit a lot of GameCube games. Not every single one, but that's going to fit a lot. So in my case, what I did, you have to format this card to FAT32. Windows, by default, will not allow you to do that with its own formatting software. You'll have to get third-party software to do it, but not a problem. There's tons of it out there. There's lots of freeware. You just install something, connect it to your computer, format to FAT32, and boom, you're good to go. From there, it's just a matter of drag and drop. You just take your ISOs, and order them however you like. In my case, I did regional folders, so like American, Japanese, European, and put the corresponding games in there, throw them into folders, put the folders in here, boom, you're basically done, except for one extremely key factor. The other thing that's absolutely crucial for setting up your SD card is you need a special ISO called boot.iso. Now, it's using an iteration of software that I'm not super familiar with, but it's my understanding it's a program called Swiss for the GameCube. Yeah, again, I haven't been following the GameCube modding scene, but I know that that's the name of the software. So you can get that relatively easily. It's like a 3 megabyte file, but it's essential that that is not only on there, but that it's in the root directory. It has to be like the first thing on there. Other than that, it doesn't really seem to care. It's just a series of folders that you organize however you want. Now, the reason that ISO has to be there is when you turn on the GameCube, it has to have some sort of, you can almost think of it as like an operating system. It has to have something to communicate with the card, and that ISO is what it does. Now, again, I haven't used the software, but it's my understanding that it's not only acts as the bootloader, as like a menu system to go through the directories and find your game, but it also has like cheat software and other sort of things on there that's pretty cool. So my buddy Jesse had actually made sure this was all working, and he tried it with his own card, and he was just like, dude, it's fantastic. Not only does it work super smooth, you know, it's got super great data rates. Like, the loading speeds on these things are insane on ODEs. They're much better than the actual disk drives. So for me, the personal benefit is being able to preserve my collection while also being able to still play my own games, because every single game on here I own. I ripped it myself. It is mine. I can prove it. I have the games right behind me in this room. So it's all my stuff. You, yes, could do piracy. That's not what I'm advocating at all, but that is possible. So yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. We've gotten to that point in technology. I'm kind of trying to take my entire collection and digitize as much of it for playing purposes while holding on to the actual games for preservation purposes. That's at 33, at that age, that's starting to be where I'm going. I'm not downloading digital stuff. That's a completely different animal. But, you know, having the digital quick access version near the TV while I archive and preserve the actual collection in another place is nice. It's convenient. And then, like I said, it comes with certain benefits. The history of the GCLoader, I actually talked to Dan about this, and he explained it to me. Dan actually is not the creator of the GCLoader. There's another guy named Daniel. There's two Dans, one Dan and a Daniel. Daniel lives in the Netherlands. It's primarily his project. Dan Koens just assisted in a couple of different ways. And according to Dan Koens, he's like, this is mostly Daniel's project. I just kind of helped out. So I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, ultimately, now we have a plug-and-play solution for the GameCube. Just go ahead and, like, boom. Now, like, every GameCube game I own is on there. HDMI modded, totally region-free, obviously Game Boy player included. I don't know how much better it gets than that. Okay, so I've been using this for a while, and I am actively trying to find things to criticize about it, but I gotta say, man, this thing is like borderline flawless. And then on top of that, it has benefits that I did not anticipate. So, all right, now I have to preface this by stating the obvious. I didn't have to do any of the installation stuff. All I had to do was set the card up. Now, as I mentioned, that was a super easy process. It doesn't even require special files other than that one individual file. And I had done all the ripping work, so my view is a tad askew in that regard, but honestly, there wasn't really, it was not painstaking in any way for me to do that. The actual installation, had I done it myself under normal circumstances, I could have done it. But keep in mind, because Nintendo uses proprietary screws, you would need your own. You would need a game bit screwdriver. I've shown those in videos that go way back. You have to have a specific screwdriver to do that. Once you take it off, there's a bunch of just standard Phillips head screws under there. You would have to remove the disc tray, to remove the GCLoader and install, or sorry, remove the original disc drive and then put in the GCLoader, which again, just pop one out, plug the other in. Then having the 3D mounted thing I'm not gonna say it's mandatory because it isn't, but it's almost mandatory. Just because getting to the SD card without this would be a true pain. Not impossible, just a true pain. With it, it not only looks a lot better, it's just functionally more logical. So I would say definitely get that. The only reason I didn't have Jesse print one of those up for me was just because I also needed the SD card extender part. So I figured, why waste Jesse's time? I'm gonna have to buy that. I might as well buy the whole package and just let him install it. So yes, with that caveat of I didn't have to do the labor, fine. Now, I'm trying to judge this solely based on the GCLoader. So without the modification, it would have been a problem, but the modification for region coding, solves that problem. Again, that's, I guess, technically an issue, which is that you need the right boot disk, but since all the right boot disks exist, you just need to know which one you need, depending on your region. You can't really say that's a flaw. And then the HDMI mod is a bonus, just that applies to anybody that's got it modded, but if you don't have that, there are options like the GCHD or the Carby that you can use on the component port there to be able to get access to the high resolution modes. In fact, I believe Dan Koons, again, now has designed a new board you can install there's some GameCubes that only have the, basically the composite S-Video, and if you're in Europe, the RGB output port. His new board will also basically re-add the high definition board out. But I mean, so people who have that can also use it. So the only limitation there would be the people who don't have it and don't want to do the mod. Where I'm going with this is, if you have the GameCube that has the high definition capabilities, you are in for a treat, even if you don't have the HDMI port, but assuming you still have other high definition options. Because the software that you use for this, Swiss, as I mentioned before, now I know this is old hat. A lot of people already are very familiar with it. They know what it is. But to those who don't, I had never used it before. So to me, it was a brand new toy. Now this Swiss gets updated apparently somewhat frequently, enough so that this version actually knew that this was the GCLoader. It recognized it right away. So you're presented with this dashboard that, in my case, had the file structure I set up. Now, as you can see in mine, I had set it up based on the regions, as I had mentioned. And I also created a cheats folder, which I was told I should do that. And then I got this big dump of like text files that people had created. You just throw them in there, and then that has various cheat functionality for various games. And when you hear cheats, you inevitably think of like, oh, invincibility and stuff like that. And that could be the case in some games. But in others, it's actually literal hacks. Like it allows widescreen support in some games. And things like that, which I thought was kind of impressive. And so that's a nice little bonus. I also decided to break up the folder structure for the American games more, because I had it basically just into 2 folders. I noticed that was like really the only hindrance, is that when you reach a certain number of games, it needs to do like a refresh on the loading, which is like a minor thing at best, but I thought, why not help it along? So I just broke it up a little bit more. But that was just my own preference. You didn't really need to do that. So yeah, I did that. But the thing that I did not know, I mean, like truly did not know, is that Swiss also has certain abilities to alter the resolutions of games. So the GameCube natively, at least the North American version, basically output into 2 options. You had 480i or 480p. 480p for if you had the component cables of the era, or if you're using things like the GCHD, Carby, or in this case the HDMI board the Pluto offers. Now, the Pluto will artificially generate a 480p signal constantly, as will the GCHD or the Carby. But if the game natively supports 480p, great, it just passes that through. And if it doesn't, it just line doubles. It's not the best looking thing, but it works. And then if you add something like the M Classic, which I've done videos on before, truly the GameCube can look stunning. But even in those cases, with all that set up, the 480i games never really looked right, because they flicker because they're interlaced content. So interlaced, for those who don't know, progressive scan, in extreme layman's terms, when you're looking at an image, if you see like, you've noticed 1080p or 1080i, 720p, the P and the I basically mean progressive and interlaced. Progressive is the image is constant. It's always on screen. Interlaced is it's like, you're seeing half the image, then you're seeing the other half, and it's like it's flipping constantly. But because of the persistence of vision, the human eye doesn't look like it's doing that, but you still notice this little flicker thing that's happening. The idea is with progressive scan, it's just always persistently there. It never does it. So you get a sharper, cleaner image. That's a simple way of saying it, basically. And so with the interlaced games, there wasn't much you could do, but apparently Swiss, I don't know exactly what it does to fix this, but it has the option to run even interlaced content in 480p, and I thought, okay, so it just artificially line doubles or whatever. But it doesn't, I don't know this to be true, but it appears that it actually, I'm not going to say it's running natively in 480p, but it almost looks like it is. It looks insanely better than I've ever seen some of the 480i games ever look. Like, I ran some of the Japanese exclusives, like Dream Mix TV, which was a Japanese exclusive GameCube game, kind of like a Smash Brothers clone, that included characters like Optimus Prime and Barbie. It's a really cool game, actually. Only runs in 480i. But with Swiss, it would run in 480p, and it looked amazing. And then, of course, I attached the M Classic to it, and it was like, wow. I ran a couple other 480i games that were in the States as well. And then, the true test, I ran some PAL content. I ran Taxi 3, which was a European exclusive GameCube game, ran at 576i. And even when I could get that to run over here with different options, it would still not look very good, and it would display a little bit off because it would run, like 50 hertz. It wasn't quite right. Swiss fixes that, and it looks incredible. So I gotta say, what I truly did not expect out of this was that it was going to make games actually look better. But keep in mind, in order for that to work, you do have to have the high definition options, such as, again, I keep saying it, the GCHD, the Carby, or in this case, the actual HDMI modification. But the software with this allows that. As far as the actual device's performance, I mean, it couldn't be more convenient, and it couldn't be easier to use. Like, to be honest, I mean, it's not that I wanted to find things to be negative of, but if there was anything wrong with it, I wanted to point that out so that you know it. But like, dude, I couldn't find anything about this that sucked. It was like essentially flawless. The only real complaint that I have about this thing is that when it comes to the cheat codes, I very specifically wanted to have cheat code access for Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. I love that game, but I'm not gonna lie, with cheat codes, that's like a different game entirely, and it can be a blast to not be subtle at all and just be Snake the Tank. You know, he just runs in there and can kill anything, and nothing can stop you. It's like, I know that's not how you're meant to play the game, but it's really weird to play it that way. Anyway, I could not find cheat codes for that. If anybody out there has the text file for using that's compatible with Swiss that allows you to get Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes cheat codes, please, I'm begging you, hook me up with that. But besides that, I got nothing bad to say about this. Daniel, Dan, and Jesse, and whoever the guy is over at Bear Industries, I think it's Bear or Laser Bear Industries. You guys all did amazing jobs. Another thing I recommend though, make sure you get a high grade SD card. I got a nice Samsung one. I've had more and more bad luck with crappy SD cards lately, and then logically so, the quality brands last longer. That's just common sense. But I mean, honestly, SD cards have become very cheap, and really, dude, the entire GameCube library is probably like 800 gigabytes. I'm not 100% on that, but I have almost every Japanese exclusive game, and it's only like, I think it's only like 60 games. It's really not that big. And then I'm only missing a couple over there. And then when it comes to the European exclusives, there's only like 10, and I've got like 6 of them. There's just not many. Most of them are only in France too, which is even weirder. But North America is where you got the widest amount of GameCube games. But like the whole set, if you were really that devoted, probably about 800 gigabytes, maybe 900. If you had a 1 terabyte SD card, you could definitely get the entire collection. However, I'm never going to do that. I don't care. But this is easily enough for my entire collection. And honestly, with my personal collection goals with the GameCube, which is I want every game on the GameCube that never came out on the Xbox, which shaves off a lot. I actually calculated this, because every single disc, like I said, is always exactly the same size. They did that on purpose. With that calculation, by my estimation, the entire set that I will eventually want, if it ever happens, will end up being like something like 420 or 430 gigabytes, and the card itself has got like 470 to 480 usable. So boom, 1 card will fit my entire collection eventually. Like, there's space for it. I'm not even close to that. No, not even by half. But yeah, dude, honestly, I have nothing really bad to say. I really don't. The link is in the description. Go check it out. If you have a GameCube, I can't recommend it enough. I would also suggest, like, if you're gonna do it, go full insane like I did. Get the region-free Switch. I mean, that is optional. I mean, if you want a cheaper GameCube, a Japanese GameCube, like if you're fresh to this, a Japanese GameCube will be substantially cheaper than a North American or European GameCube. But, you know, that's up to you. If you're going to do that, you would be best suited to region mod it, but even then, again, you could get just the other version of the boot.iso file and just subvert that problem. This is just like a technicality if you want it. I really recommend the Pluto HDMI board. Like, I really like that thing. But again, even with that, you could get the GCHD or the Kirby and bypass that. So after that, man, like, Game Boy Player and just this thing and Swiss, and it's flawless. I wish I had something. I wish I actually had a problem with it so that the video would be more interesting, to be honest. Me coming out here and be like, it's perfect, is just... I'm sorry, I wish I had something else to say about it, but no, dude, I can't recommend enough. Thank you so much to Daniel for all of his efforts. Thank you to Dan for his efforts. Thank you to Jesse for doing all that work on it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys could please like, comment, subscribe, check out all the stuff in the social media in the description. Again, check this out if you want to pick up the GCLoader specifically. I'll also include a link to the Laser Bear guy, I'm sorry, I forget his name. And I'll actually I'll put Jesse's email in there too, in case you need a guy to like do all this work. But again, you know, you'd have to work that out with him. Or you can check him out on Instagram or something like that. I'll put that in there too. So thank you guys very much, and I'll see you all later.